Well, welcome. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and, all right, I'll introduce you, Liz. So we have Liz Kozminski here and she is with our Leverage Center. And Liz runs her own coordinating business. Liz, if you want to give us a rundown on what you do as a transaction coordinator, and then we'll get into the flow of a transaction.
I mean, I feel like they're one and the same. The flow of the transaction is what I do as a coordinator at least for the most part. So,
Good point.
But
as people slowly start getting on.
Yep.
Sorry, go ahead.
I did my screen share. I just want to make sure that it worked.
Oh, there you can see it. Let's see.
Did it? Or
not? No.
Okay.
Perfect. Here we go.
All right. Good. Okay. So first off, I feel like I have to kind of introduce myself, give my credentials. Just a quick about me. I was born in Idaho. My husband was born in Ohio. So after we got married, we moved back here. We currently have 2 boys. I actually started in real estate in 2015 on a team as an administrator. I became licensed in 2017. I was on that team for 6 years, and then I've been an independent transaction coordinator since 2021. And at this point, I have done over 1,800 transactions throughout my time in real estate. So things to remember when you're going through a transaction is everything is figure outable. No matter what happens, there is a way to figure out how to get through it. And for any agents who are new and who are worried, it will get easier over time. And then finally, if this is too much for you, you can leverage it out. So contract to close is exactly what it sounds like from the point you go under contract on property to the point you close, or the property files and transfers. So to begin with, at the very beginning, this is actually slightly before contract. However, for the agents out there, you write an offer, you don't know what to do next. Just a few pointers when it comes to actually submitting that offer to the listing agent. Make sure you read the broker's remarks, because some agents say they want you to share it with them via .loop. Some agents say they don't want it from .loop. They only want it as a PDF. You may get some other information in reading those broker's remarks that will actually help you craft a better offer as well. Also, make sure that you call and text the agent and ask what is important to the seller. Because maybe the seller needs to sell the property quickly, or maybe they need to sell it, but they need 30 days in the property before they hand over possession. So knowing what is important to the seller is going to help you craft a better offer as well. The other thing is, with the market the way it currently is, or the changes that have been made, it's also important for you to contact the listing agent and ask them what commission is being offered, since that's something that needs to be written in to your offer as well. In addition, make sure that you look at the MLS supplements. Usually you can find the residential property disclosure and the lead-based paint disclosure there. So you want to make sure you have those so that your buyer can look at them and sign them as well. And then when it comes time to send over your offer, you don't need to send over everything. They don't need to see your consumer guide. They don't need to see your exclusive buyer representation agreement. They will need a pre-approval or a proof of funds. Obviously the purchase agreement, the buyer broker compensation, which again is that new document that will tell us, how much you're getting paid and by who. The agency disclosure, the resident property disclosure, and lead-based paint disclosure, if they were on the MLS and you had them signed, and then anything else that's needed depending on your particular contract. ABA, if you're using title company in the ABA, a home warranty form if the seller hadn't offered a home warranty, but your buyer is asking for one, a condo addendum if it's a condo, an FHA addendum if it's an FHA, or FHA/VA. And then house sale contingency or concurrency if either of those are relevant documents. But again, only send over what the listing agent needs to see, just so that they don't have to deal with unnecessary paperwork. And then I also would always recommend that any agent call or text the listing agent to let them know that you have sent them an offer, so they can confirm that they've received it, so it doesn't get lost, go to spam, anything like that. And it also just kind of makes you look a little bit better as the buyer's agent, that you are on top of things, and you're good with communication. So I want to pause here and see if there are any questions. Anyone have any questions or comments that they would like to make about this?
So I was just going to add in, because this is super helpful. I was kind of quickly jotting down the checklist that you said, Liz. So what you explained for agents to read broker's remarks, and those broker's remarks are going to be in the MLS, and they're normally at the bottom of that MLS page. So if you see the MLS, if you're looking at the property in the MLS, scroll down, it says broker's remarks, and those are only things that we as agents can see. And then another thing with the supplements in the MLS, there'll be a picture of the Q property you're looking at. Right next to it, there'll be supplements section. If you don't see it there, then that agent has not put the residential property disclosure of lead paint in the MLS, and then you will have to request that from them.
Yep.
And I love that you included to call and text the agent. So if you have an interested buyer in the property, definitely introduce yourself to that agent, just so like you guys are potentially going to be working on that transaction together. So introducing yourself and getting the best interest for your client too will be very helpful.
Yes.
Okay.
And I would say too, if you're you've submitted an offer, if the agent tells you, oh yeah, we're going to accept your offer, I would caution you to be careful telling that to your buyer until you actually get the contract signed. Because just because they tell you they're accepting your offer doesn't mean that they can't accept another offer. If it comes in between that point and when they're signing, if a better offer comes in, they can accept it. They don't have to follow through on what they said. So I would just also caution a lot of agents, and be careful what you say to your clients. On the buyer side, that they got an offer. On the listing side, be cautious saying that you're going to get an offer until you actually have it in hand, because that's also something that a lot of agents will text, hey, we're writing an offer, and then they don't. The clients just decide they don't want it, or something changes. So just be cautious too about what you tell your client until you have something signed in hand. Okay, so once the listing agent has sent you back the signed contract, what are the next steps? Get any missing initials. So if anything changed, the price, closing dates, there's various things that could change throughout the negotiations. The seller should have initialed those. So then you need to get your buyer to initial them as well. You don't technically have a contract until all of the initials are on there as well. However, once it's completely signed and initialed, then you just need to make sure that it gets to everyone who needs it. So obviously the co-broke needs a copy. Your client should have a copy of every document they've signed, but it doesn't hurt to send it to them again. And then the title and the lender also need to get copies so that they can get started on their part. You also need to make sure that you get your client's contact info and your escrow letter to title. The escrow letter is another document that you will find in our KWGM docs, and it basically spells out how much you are going to get paid so that the title company knows to pay you and where to send the check. And then make sure that you're, as a buyer's agent, that your client knows what they need to be doing next. So they need to be scheduling their home inspection, submitting their earnest money to the title company, and then starting their loan. All of this is, of course, assuming that they are having an inspection, they have a loan, and they're submitting earnest money. But earnest money is in 99.5% of contracts. Inspections and loans are obviously not as frequent, because you're still going to get some cash offers or no inspection deals. But you need to make sure that, everyone has what they need, that everyone can be taking care of their steps. Because that's actually a big part of this entire process, is just making sure that everyone has what they need so that we can get to closing. So here's just kind of some different things that are good for the agent to track. Again, making sure that the earnest money has been submitted to the title company, and you will need a copy of that to upload to your file for compliance. So make sure you get a copy of that as well. The inspection gets scheduled, that it's attended, and you as the agent should be there to let the inspector in, as well as it's another good chance for you to have some face-to-face time with your client. It's a great time to ask for a review or a referral, because they're super happy, super excited with this property that they're getting. And then after the inspection itself is over, that's when you negotiate any repairs on the removal of contingencies, which is another document that you can find in our .loop or DocuSign forms. So, and all of that should happen within the time frame specified in the contract. So then need to be checking in on the lender and the loan, making sure that the appraisal gets ordered. If the appraiser, I've heard of deals before where closing day comes and someone's like, are we closing today? And they're like, no, we haven't even ordered the appraisal. So just stay on top of that. Try to make sure that everyone is doing things as quickly as possible, so that we, something like that doesn't end up causing a delay. Title work, the title company will take care of most of it, and they should let you know. However, every now and then they come up with, especially when your client has a common name, they'll come up with something on title that they actually have to confirm that it's not the buyer or the seller. Like a lien that's against someone with their name. And so sometimes they have to actually apply to the state to find out whether or not it's a party of the transaction or not. And when they have to do that, sometimes it can extend closing as well. So making sure that any forms the title company sends out to be filled out by the buyer or seller get completed as early as possible. Otherwise, if there is one of these potential liens, it can, again, delay closing. So there's, things to do right before closing. The walkthrough is one of them. Another opportunity for you and your buyer to walk through the property, make sure it's in the same condition as when you put in the offer. And if there were any repairs requested from the removal of contingencies, you can confirm at that point that the repairs have been done. Also during pre-closing, I like to make sure that the buyers know who the utility providers are, so they can get their utilities set up for a smooth transfer once the property closes. Point of sale is a fun one in this area. So point of sale is not in all cities. So you have to kind of just figure out whether or not your property is in a city that has a point of sale. And I don't know if everyone knows what it is, but I'm going to explain it just in case you don't know. So point of sale is basically the city will come out and will inspect the property. And if there are certain things that they deem violations, they will tell the seller that they need to fix those violations before the property transfers. Or the buyer can assume the violations, and then they have a certain amount of time after the property transfers to get the repairs made. So basically, this means that for every property that sells, the city has come out and inspected it, and they're trying to improve the properties. I think the thinking behind it is you're going to get rid of some of these slumlords that just sell these properties cheaply, from one slumlord to the next. However, it's ultimately kind of makes it harder for us to do our job, because you can't transfer the property until this is completed. So again, seller gets an inspection, does repairs, gets a clean point of sale, you can transfer, or the buyer can assume the violations. And sometimes, again, depending on the city, because every city does this differently, some of them will require an escrow of funds if the buyer is assuming the violations. Some don't. Some of them, the title company can escrow the funds. Some of them, the city has to hold them. So again, you have to kind of figure out for whatever city your property is in, what their building department requires in terms of point of sale. But then again, this is another one to just kind of stay on top of to make sure that, you know, lender's ready, title's ready, but if the city's not ready, you're not going to be able to transfer on time. Home warranty. If there's a home warranty in the contract, then you should be ordering that. So you can, I think Renee Kozak is our new America's Preferred Home Warranty rep. If you need a warranty, you can reach out to her. She can get you a login for, there's a Real Pro website that allows you to order the warranty online, or you can fill it out and send it to her or the email address that's on the form, and they'll give you an invoice. If you do it online, you fill out the forms, you get the invoice right away. The invoice has to go to the title company so they know who to send the check to for the home warranty to actually be active. And then the final thing is compliance and commissions. This happens in Command, and it's not actually a part of the transaction, but it is necessary if you want to get paid. So for compliance, there's a certain list of documents that need to be filled out. And those have to be loaded into Command and submitted to the Market Center to review. And then once all of those have been turned in, you're compliant. And the other thing that is required in Command is for you to submit the commission amount. So you can put in there however much you're getting. This is where if you wanted to have like a savings deduction and education deduction, you could put that in there. But a lot of that, and then that just has to be submitted as well. It's, for the most part, it's fairly straightforward, as long as you don't have any weird things that are happening with the commission. So here's, I guess maybe I should go back. Any questions on any of this? I realize that was a lot of information thrown out really fast. Nope. Okay. Important dates to know and to track. Contract date. So that would be the date that the last signature or initial went on the contract. And the reason why this is important is because other dates are based off of that. So for example, you have 4 days after your contract date to get the earnest money turned in. And then the inspection deadline is also based on the contract date. So knowing how long you have to actually have the inspection completed. And then in addition, the inspection response. So the way our contract reads is 3 days after you've had the inspection or the last inspection, you have 3 days to discuss it with your client and come up with the response that you want to give to the sellers in terms of what you may or may not be asking for. Now, every contract is different. So I know the new state purchase agreement, the inspection response is actually 3 or 4 days after the inspection deadline. So again, you just kind of have to read through and look at this. But on ours, you have 3 days after you've had the last inspection to get that response out. On the contract, it will also state a date for the loan application. So that's when your client needs to have talked to the lender, filled out everything, officially applied for the loan by that date. The loan approval date is also in the contract, and that is when the lender should have approved the loan by. You can request a loan approval letter. However, for most deals I've seen, it's not really necessary unless the listing agent or the seller is requesting it. And I will admit that the loan approval date is probably the one that is most ignored in our contract. So for the most part, it seems like as long as the loan is approved in time for us to close on the closing date, no one really cares quite so much about whether or not that date has been hit. So I tell you that, however, again, just be aware that that is in there. Appraisal date. The appraisal date is not actually in our contract. However, it's still something to be aware of so that you know when it is scheduled for and you have an idea of when it'll come back. making sure that that will be early enough that it's not going to delay your closing. Then the walkthrough date, there's a blank in the contract that allows you to put a certain, like a number in there of days to walk through the property. I think 3 is kind of a standard number. However, so like within 3 days, 3 days before closing, then you and the buyer have the ability to walk through the property. You've also got the closing date. And there's 2 different dates in our contract that kind of go the closing date. So the first date is when all docs and funds are supposed to be with the title company. And then the second date is to actually file and fund. And so I guess this is another place where things are not always followed exactly. Usually as long as the documents, so that would be the signed documents that the buyers and sellers have to sign before closing. As long as those and like the buyer and the lender's funds to fund the property, as long as those come in before the file and fund date, usually or early enough that day for closing to happen on that date, that's usually sufficient. But again, the closing date is in the contract, and then the possession date. Possession is most often the same day as closing. However, not always, and is again something that can be negotiated depending on what the buyer or the seller need. Any questions on this? Anything I missed, Kelly?
No, I don't think so. Yeah. I guess when the earnest money, just
Yes.
to discuss that. So it's like the earnest money. So if they are, like you said, normally there is earnest money involved, getting specific you're using so that you know where to submit that earnest money for,
Yes.
to give that instructions to your client. Yeah. And then kind of just updating your clients on like who's going to be contacting them when, like you'll be speaking to once we submit the documents to the title company, title officers will be assigned to our file and then contact you. And then, yeah, it's kind of like keeping them in the loop on who's going to be reaching out and like what documents are going to be headed their way.
Yes.
Lots of signing.
And I guess going off of the earnest money as well, letting your client know how they can deposit the earnest money. They can always write a check, they can always wire the funds, and then some title companies also have the option to do like an online ACH transfer, which is usually the link for that option is on their website, so you can check it out, or you can just talk to whoever's assigned to you as a title officer, and they can let you know too. As well as obviously if your client wants to wire the instructions, they can send the buyer the wiring instructions. And I would highly recommend that you never forward wiring instructions to your client. Have the title company send them directly, just to avoid potential wire fraud. So I personally will never touch the wiring instructions. I tell all clients that they'll come directly from the title company and never to expect them from me. All right, so negotiation, and I will admit this, like I don't have experience with negotiation because I work as a transaction coordinator, not as an agent. However, these are the different points in the contract where you may need to negotiate. So obviously there's the initial contract, all of the details there. After the inspection, there may be some negotiation needs to happen in terms of what they're asking for in terms of repairs or price decrease or seller credit, anything like that. If the appraisal comes back short, you'll probably need to do a little bit of negotiation around that, whether the seller is going to come down to meet the appraised price, whether you're going to meet somewhere in the middle, or if the buyer is going to be able to cover the shortfall. Point of sale, again, the buyer, it can assume the violations. So there's a wide range of negotiations that can go on there as well, whether the seller is going to deliver the property point of sale compliant, or the buyer is going to assume, or it's winter and there's snow on the ground, so we can't actually replace that sidewalk block like the point of sale says we have to, so the buyer is going to assume that one violation and the seller is going to credit the buyer or put into escrow for the buyer the funds that are needed to repair it. So there's a wide variety of things that can get negotiated around that as well. And then, like I mentioned before, occasionally there's things that come up on title that can potentially need to be negotiated, especially if there's a lien on the property. Sometimes negotiating to get the seller to agree to escrow the funds with the title company until they can clear the lien or prove that the lien is a part of the seller. That is one option for getting the closing to move forward, even when there's a title issue that needs to be figured out. And again, if this is overwhelming, I promise you, the more you do it, the more natural it'll become, the easier it'll become. And any questions you have on any of this, anyone at the brokerage is willing to help. We've got the Facebook group that you can ask questions in. You can ask anyone on the leadership team, other agents in the office. That's one of the great things about coming into the office is you actually see agents and can talk to them and potentially get help on things like that. So again, just don't feel overwhelmed if you end up in a negotiation on any one of these things. So I am a transaction coordinator, so I handle a lot of this. So a lot of this I've done many, many times, and then there's a few things that I don't do. So for the most part, that I do just about everything except for negotiating. I don't go to the property, so I don't do walkthroughs or inspections. I don't maintain the client relationship. This is about your relationship with them, and you building that relationship to make sure that, because you're the one who should be getting the referrals and the reviews. It's not me. And I don't find you your next deal. What I do is I take enough stuff off your plate that you have the time to find your next deal. And this should take approximately 20 hours per transaction off your plate. So for anyone here who doesn't have my contact information, this is it. You can put my phone number in your phone, save it. If you have any questions, just send me a text. I'm always happy to help. And yeah, and I mean, questions about a lot of things too. I've been working in command for years. And so if you even have a question about adding a contact or something like that, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to answer any questions that I can. And if I don't know, I will direct you to someone who does or help you get the answer.
Amazing. Thank you, Liz.
Yep.
Anybody have any questions? That was perfect. Wait, yeah, can you go back to I like your slide on does and doesn't? That's great.
Yep.
Yeah. So as she explained, negotiating property visits. So it's your client you're the ones who's speaking to them, seeing them. Liz is just doing all the behind the scenes, making sure everything is on track. We're meeting deadlines. All the documents have T's crossed, I's dotted, everything's initialed. She sends out the utilities for your clients, like I said, taking everything off your plate to then basically to then make sure that your clients are satisfied with everything that's going on and everything is explained very clearly to them. Because lots of hands in the transaction when it comes to title, the loan, the appraiser, the inspectors, and even just like if you're not using Liz, she's still here as a resource for you to answer questions. And once you get busier, then you'll reach out to her. Cool. Yay, thank you so much, Liz, for the
Yeah.
PowerPoint. And then yes, everybody who attended today will share the PowerPoint with you as well.
Yep.
Cool. anything that you wanted to hear that we didn't chat about? Or they have questions on? No? All right, cool. All right, good. We covered everything then. Yay. Thank you so much again, Liz. And thanks everyone for joining today.
Thank you.
Happy Monday. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.